all I can really say is ruh-roh. I got a new microphone stand and mount, so my audio will come crisp in my blue Yeti here, and I'm super happy to have that. So let me know if the sound is really good on this one. Okay, Scoob. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about Scoob. Now this one I was very much on the fence. If you've been watching a couple of my videos, I did a trailer review, I guess, a couple Instagram posts, things like that, where I just wasn't really sure if I wanted to like this movie or was interested in it. Now, because of the whole pandemic, it got released directly to video on demand. You can access it on Vudu, Amazon Prime, probably iTunes, and a bunch of other services. So this just came out. I watched it today, and all I can really say is ruh-roh. Now, it's not all bad. It does have some things going for it, but what I wanted and what this was just wasn't the movie that I was wanting, especially from a Scooby Doo movie. It didn't feel like a Scooby Doo movie. So essentially the story, and that's the difficult part, is I don't really know how to tell you the story of this movie. It's sort of Scooby and Shaggy became friends early on. We kind of get their origin story more or less, and then it just kind of goes into like this adventure of them like getting abducted, and then being Scooby is like the crux, the ultimate power of this thing that Dick Dastardly, a very big character in the Hanna-Barbera universe, needs in order to resurrect this particular creature or get access to this particular thing. This is probably a spoiler, but realistically it was in the synopsis, I think, so it's not really that big of a spoiler. But more or less, it's just an okay movie. It wasn't mind-blowing. It really wasn't even that great, but it did have a couple things going for it. It was like, okay, this is starting to get to somewhere, and then it would immediately fall flat on its face. But I don't want to talk only negative about this movie. Let's go ahead and start about some positives. Now, I think there's only two positives about this entire movie. The first being the animation. It's absolutely like state-of-the-art animation. It's very top-notch, which I was pretty surprised from Warner Brothers. Not that they do a bad job, but some of the like textures, like you felt like were very real. Like there's some like brick walls and some other textures throughout the movie that do genuinely feel and look photorealistic. And I think that's kind of with a grain of salt, because the animation was so good that when you put it next to like these cartoonish faces, it just doesn't really feel real. Like it kind of takes you out, and it's kind of jarring. But overall, the visual look of the movie, the style, the animation was absolutely beautiful. That was probably one of the best things. Second best thing was actually the music, which I was kind of surprised about, because you don't really expect an animated movie like this to have great music. But this one actually did have a good, fair selection of songs. Plus, there was an Outkast song, which I feel like was kind of a nod to the Scooby Doo old school one, when they went to Spooky Island, which was done by Outkast. So that was kind of nice. The Outkast was still a part of the process, and I guess in some way, but that's really where a lot of the positives end. A lot of this movie, not necessarily is negative, but it's just sort of meh. And where we start to get into those gray areas is actually going to be with the voice acting. Now, it wasn't bad, I would say. A lot of it actually was fairly good. I did actually like Zac Efron and Amanda Seyfried as Daphne and Fred. I don't remember who did Velma, but she did a pretty good job for the most part. I was a little bit thrown off by Will Forte as Shaggy. Not that it was bad. It's just, I don't know why they couldn't have maybe gotten Matthew Lillard, who's been doing it for years, even outside of his live action roles in Scooby Doo as Shaggy. Back in, I think that was like 2002, if I'm not wrong. But he does a much superior job. I feel like this is just a poor interpretation of Shaggy for the most part. Scooby Doo is done by Frank Welker, who's been doing him for a really long time. So really no complaints there. Although there was something strange I noticed, that Scooby Doo has always had like that ruh-roh and has difficulties pronouncing certain words, which we are all very familiar with, if anybody has seen Scooby Doo. Now, there were a couple of times where he actually dropped that. There's this big moment towards, like, I guess the climax of the movie, where he says no instead of row, which it should have been, because he's always pronounced it with a row, like row, like if it's oh no. but instead he just went no, and like just I think they just straight up forgot it or they used the wrong take. I'm not entirely sure, but it was kind of off-putting there. But the voice acting in general was just sort of okay. Character-wise, they were pretty on point. Fred was the best, I think. He just felt the most Fred, if anything, kind of dumb, but also kind of fun at the same time, which I liked a lot. And like the Dick Dastardly character was a little too much. I didn't like any of that. Mark Wahlberg surprisingly plays Blue Falcon, which I actually didn't even know that going into this movie. But like once you hear it, you're like, it's friggin' Mark Wahlberg. Like I want to hear him do his weird like 4 a.m. inspirational gym speeches. Anytime he talks now after watching him on Instagram, I feel like that's just super funny. And in terms of the story, it was just kind of weird overall. I mean, it didn't really follow a plot. I feel like whenever they make a grander Scooby Doo movie outside of what we know as Scooby Doo, they take away everything that makes Scooby Doo, and just say, hey, let's just put Shaggy and Scooby in some weird situation where Scooby is going to be the one that's going to be the ultimate power, or the thing that's going to be essentially the red herring of the movie, where his participation in whatever event is going to be the catalyst for maybe something bad or like this big life world changing thing. And it just doesn't really make sense. I don't think that's what Scooby-Doo is. And that's why it's so off-putting story-wise, is they always put that. They did it back in the live action version as well. And it's just kind of off-putting and not really fun at all. It's just kind of weird and gives me a weird vibe. I just want them, Mystery Inc., to solve mysteries. It's really not that hard. Oh, and by the way, and another thing that I found very jarring is that they usually put in some like very subtle adult humor in these types of movies for animation movies to get the parents at least somewhat engaged, because the kids are going to be so engaged with the animation and the weird things that are happening. This one, they really kind of pushed that, especially with Dick Dastardly. And there was another moment, I don't really remember what it was anymore, but they said his name. They were going hard on him calling or like being called just sort of Dick instead of Dick Dastardly, which I know it's a kids movie and it wasn't with that sort of thought process behind it that they were trying to be perverse or get kids to say dick a lot or something like that. But it just didn't feel like this was something that was meant for kids. It was clearly an adult sort of joke put in there just to have dick said a lot of times. But other than that, it was just sort of like, this guy can easily go away. None of this is really interesting. They even tried to pull like an extra little twist, which was totally unwarranted. And they even have like Captain Caveman. Everything just gets really weird really fast in this movie and makes a whole lot of nonsense. I mean, there's no point in the movie where I was completely and totally engaged. I think actually the most engaged I was when we were away from Shaggy and Scooby, which is not what you want from a Scooby-Doo movie. Again, I just want it to be a Mystery Inc. doing mysteries, solving the cases and trying to take the rubber mask off the guy or some aspect. Doesn't have to involve aliens or zombies or some undead creature or vampires or whatever it may be. Yes, Scooby-Doo has had a lot of episodes back in its heyday where they just did weird stuff and like they would hang out with Batman or the Globetrotters. But realistically, those were just sort of like one-off and fun, not necessarily like this grandiose story trying to get Scooby, like force the Mystery Inc. and Scooby and Shaggy into this situation. It just feels very off-putting. Like Blue Falcon's a superhero with Dino Mutt, but there's also Dick Dastardly, but there's no explanation along with that, with like Captain Caveman of like a multiverse of Hanna-Barbera. It just doesn't make any sense. It's just a mishmash of ideas for about an hour and a half. And it's okay to watch. I do recommend watching it, especially if you have kids. The animation, like I said in the beginning, absolutely beautiful. But if you're looking for something grand, you're probably not going to find it. I wouldn't rush to watch this movie. If you can realistically wait until it's a free option on Prime or on Netflix or Hulu, whatever the case may be, I say go for it. But if you're going to actually pay for it, make sure you're only paying like $3.99, $4.99 just to rent it for like 24 hours. Otherwise, you're kind of wasting your money. To be honest with you, I think that's really all I have in terms of what I want to say about this movie. There's really not worth talking about a whole lot. It's not worth delving deep into. Could they make a sequel? Probably, but it's not going to be a continuation of what the story was here. It's just going to be like another weird one-off type of story. And like, I feel like the stories need to go somewhere, because even when they had that emotional moment, they had one really good emotional moment where I was like, damn, they just did that in a Scooby Doo movie. They brought the solution in such a weird, unexplained way that I don't know if I could watch it again. It's just difficult to kind of watch. And this is a one time, if never watch for me ever again. Um, Maybe if my son ever wants to watch it, but really, you can pretty much steer clear of Scoob. But other than that, those are really all my thoughts on Scoob. If you guys have seen it, make sure you let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section down below. Also, while you're down there, leave a like on this video and click that subscribe button if you haven't already, as I do have a new video every single Thursday, cinematically late. I do have a couple of other videos upcoming all the time. I've got a bunch of new stuff. I can't really promise you because I don't know what's coming out when, other than cinematically late, which comes out every single week. So make sure you guys are subscribed for that. Really, I think that's all I have for now. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I hope to see you in the next one.